Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. Welcome to the Credit Suisse Race Control building here at Goodwood Revival for 2016, the 8th Credit Suisse Historic Racing Forum. My name is Henry Hope Frosted. I'll introduce the panel in a moment. You're very welcome if you're joining us online as well or listening on 87.7 FM, the official sound of the Goodwood Revival. Before we start, I would like to introduce Credit Suisse Managing Director UK, Karsten Blanc.
Thank you, Henry, and good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's clearly a full house, and thank you all for joining us for breakfast. And now the 12th year of Credit Suisse Classic Car program, and it's going from strength to strength, and it's an initiative that we're very passionate about. And we'd like to take the opportunity to thank you all for your continued support over the years, and also, of course, to Lord March to enable us to bring the event to Goodwood here. So the particular highlight of the program for us is this Credit Suisse Historic Racing Forum. And it's great to see so many friends here today for the 8th staging of this, once again moderated by the inimitable Henry Hope Frost. Here. Anyway, we have, again, as you've seen, a superb lineup of racing legends and friends of Credit Suisse. And we're here to discuss the exciting topic of closed cockpit versus single-seaters, the path to Motorsport Glory. The forum, in our eyes, has always been informative, entertaining, and has led to many amusing discussions. And I'm in no doubt that will happen again today. So without further ado, I hand back to Henry, and thank you once again for coming here. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Karsten, for that welcome. Let me introduce the panel to you. There will be nobody here on these sofas you don't recognise. If there is, put your hand up now. The exits are there. Let me start on my left, the most famous man in motor racing. He was a 16-time Grand Prix winner, a man who once said when asked if he was bothered about not winning the Formula One World Championship, he did finish runner-up on 4 occasions, he said, not really, because some pretty crappy people won it. It is the one and only Sir Stirling Moss. To Stirling's left, a man who won 2 rounds of the World Sportscar Championship back in the early 80s in his own car. He's a bit of a cad, no pun intended, a bon viveur, and by God he can tell stories. It's Alain de Cadenet. A man on the end who is irritatingly handsome and irritatingly cool. Also has an irritating love of motorsport, of all genres. He is a 3-time Indy 500 winner, a 4-time IndyCar champion, Mr. Dario Franchitti. To my right, a man who won the British Formula 3 Championship. He raced for Brabham, the family team, in the early 90s. He moved to sports cars. He won the American Le Mans Series. He won Le Mans for Peugeot in 2009. Mr. David Brabham. And just to revisit that irritatingly cool and irritatingly handsome theme, a 2-time, now he's in his 60s, still very cool, a 2-time World Sportscar Champion, 5-time Le Mans winner, the one and only Mr. Derek Bell.
I thought it was you.
Jochen, you're nearly as good looking, don't worry. He is.
Don't rub it in. I'm stiff enough as it is.
He did win a World Championship Grand Prix for McLaren, and he was teammate to James Hunt. Hopefully some of those stories will come out today. He's also a Le Mans winner, Mr. Jochen Mass. It's a good job my stool's got a swivelly thing on it, isn't it? Sir Stirling, let me start with you. Our theme, closed cockpits versus single-seaters. You raced everything, all the time, anywhere you were asked to race. That sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. Is that sad?
I think it's sad, yes. I think people who are out there racing enjoy racing against names. So if you can get more drivers in, the drivers coming up enjoy it more. I certainly think it is.
When you started in hill climbing in the late 1940s, did you aspire only to be a Grand Prix driver?
I'd read about Bera and going around Europe and racing in the RA and so on. I thought, well, that sounded really cool. And so when I got the opportunity, I started on that with John Heath.
And in your day, you had to have a level of adaptability, didn't you? You had to be able to jump in and be quick in anything. And you did that. It didn't matter whether it was a single-seater, a sports car, a touring car, a hill climb car, or a rally car. You just made it work for you, didn't you? What's the secret?
Putting your foot down and going fast, I suppose. Well, you know, one doesn't go into a corner thinking, well, you know, what do I do with this one? You already had practice and you've honed your the way you're going to go, and I think that's fairly easy from there on.
Gentlemen, do feel free to chip in and argue or you know, add your piece. Don't wait for me to ask you a question.
But he wanted to...
That's annoying, isn't it? Put your foot down and go faster.
You were on horses, right? Sterling, you wanted to go horse riding all the time.
Yeah, you did horses, didn't you?
Yeah, but that's...
They're dreadful things.
Yeah. My sister got old enough, and then my mother took the pressure off me, so I could go with Dad to hill climbs and so on.
Never has anything with only one horsepower been so dangerous. Isn't that the truth? As a horse.
You ride a horse. Horses are far more dangerous.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but don't forget, he just had a paper mache pot on his head and no, but seatbelts too. I mean, that was
the CAD has started already. Oh, it's good to see. You built your own sports car. Did you do that because you couldn't afford or didn't want to do Grand Prix racing?
Well, I had already, when Jack Brabham retired, I got hold of his BT33 because I did fancy going Grand Prix racing, but my first wife had already threatened to walk out on me if I went near a Formula One car because she thought they were really dangerous. But I got permission to do Le Mans instead. And she walked out eventually anyway. What?
Was that the safe option?
Well, you see, it was misconceived that Le Mans was a pretty safe race, but Grand Prix racing was dangerous because so many people were getting killed in it. That in fact, you're at risk for an awful lot longer, obviously, in a 24-hour race than you would be in a Grand Prix, theoretically. But that period in the late 60s and early 70s, I think our other drivers will agree, it was a really dangerous period in motor racing history because you had lots of grunt from behind you and not much of a thing to be sitting in. You know, your bum's only about an inch off the road. If you hit anything hard, you still had trees and hedges and things at the Nürburgring. But the reason I did my own car is because I got this kind of urge to be the first person that won Le Mans with a homemade car. And the strange thing is, Rondeau came over to see the car that Gordon Murray designed for me and asked me, was this a difficult thing to do? And I said, it's not so much difficult. I said, you've got to find the money and the time.
You did have Gordon Murray, though.
Well, I had Gordon Murray, but when he won the race in 1980, he was the first person, he did what I'd wanted to do, first person to ever win Le Mans in a homemade car. Unfortunately, he had a nasty hobby of trying to get across railway crossings when the bars were down before the train came. And he was very good at it until the last time he tried it. It's a very sad way to go when you think, for anybody.
I'm just slightly disappointed to hear that you bowed to pressure from the then Mrs. de Cadenet and did what she asked.
Well,
that doesn't sound like you at all.
If you met her, you'd see why.
And she was good enough at the time.
Perhaps
she wasn't.
She was. I mean, if Bridget Bardot was the best-looking woman in the world at that time, I think my first wife was running her quite close second. So, whatever she told me to do, I had to do. So,
fair play.
But let me tell you, anybody could go Grand Prix racing in those days. I mean, all you had to do. David's dad retired, and there's his car sitting there doing nothing. You show up and do a deal, take the car away. I mean, we used to send that car with a transit van and a trailer. We sent it to America on a roll-on, roll-off ferry. Fly your driver and your mechanics on a Page and Moy tour to go to a Grand Prix so they can take part.
We've all done it.
Yeah, it was just fun, you know, just fun. But I suppose that today, ever since Bernard Eccleston took over, it's impossible to get a look into Grand Prix racing if you haven't got untold millions, and it's no longer a sport, of course, it's just a huge business. We all know that.
Doesn't he still owe you those 10 wheels, Bernie?
Bernie nicked my wheels, yeah. He phoned up and said, look, I thought I bought that car, but you've got it. He said, can I borrow some wheels? So he sent his van up and he took 10 wheels away, Brabham Formula One wheels. And at the end of the season I said, listen, I need my wheels back, so I'm building a sports car. Well, he knew that because Gordon was working for him and I borrowed him in the evenings. And he said, what wheels are you talking about? I said, the wheels I loaned you. He said, them wheels, they're all porous. I had to melt them down. I'm having new ones made. How many do you want? They're 200 quid each.
Yeah, because normally you don't want Bernie to send the van round, do you? No.
I have to tell you, Bernie's somebody else. If Bernie ever gives you
You'll
advice...
get a chance in a minute, I promise.
If Bernie gives you advice, take it and do it, because the guy is unbelievable. I mean, he's a very good friend to people who he enjoys. I'm told he can be quite unpleasant to those he doesn't.
Yeah. I'm not going there. I'm not going there at all. Dario, you came up through the traditional ranks, Formula Vauxhall Junior, Formula Vauxhall, Formula 3, and then a bit of a curveball with Mercedes. Did you see that as a long-term view to Formula 1, possibly?
They were going to pay me. I mean, basically, no, I was driving for Jackie Stewart in Formula 3. Hadn't had a particularly good year. I was teammates to Jan Magnussen. He won 16 races, was it?
You did win the first round.
Yeah, I won one. First round, I thought, here we go, I'll show him. Yeah. So at the end of the season, Mercedes phoned up and said, hey, come and test our car, which I really enjoyed. And to cut a long story short, there wasn't a seat for me in the team. And then in January there was, when I was just about to sign my contract to re-up with Jackie. But it was really I was sort of getting slowly more into debt on the single-seater ladder, and couldn't see past Formula 3. I didn't see how I was going to get to do Formula 3000. Didn't see where the money was going to come from. I wasn't seeing any sort of doors opening, and I guess unbeknownst to me, Jackie was setting the foundations for Stewart Grand Prix, and but I didn't understand that at the time, and I thought Mercedes were going to be the best chance, and it almost happened. As the way of things, you wait on a bus coming along and two come along. So I went, after DTM, I went to America, and as I went to America, a seat opened up as the McLaren test driver, but I didn't feel I could do both, and so stayed in the States.
Is it still the case that Formula 1 is here and everything else is down here? And any young kid who starts in karting and wants to break into BRDC Formula 4 or whatever the first rung on the car ladder is, has only got eyes for Formula 1?
It was certainly my dream as a kid. And as I got further up the ladder, I kind of saw that what it actually was like. And I don't know if it's because we've kind of been there, seen it, done it, but it's not got the thrill anymore for me, whether that's because of the tracks now or the cars or again, because I'm sort of looking back on a career rather than looking into it. But I just don't feel that anymore. And having driven a bunch of different cars, I had a lot of fun and a lot of challenge driving sports cars, driving NASCAR, driving Indy cars. And do I feel sort of a little slighted that I didn't drive F1 or whatever? No, I don't. I didn't, because
you've done okay without it, haven't you?
Done okay, but to Stirling's point, you see some of the guys that are in there. Never mind the guys that won the World Championship. You see some of the guys that go in there and actually do okay, and you think, it can't be that.
Yeah, but don't forget they've bought their way in too.
Oh, that's the thing. Absolutely.
And that's the difference, isn't it? I mean, that's the financial and cultural differences are such that you can't just get in on a wing and a prayer. You've got to have a...
No, not these days. I mean, when Dario and myself were coming through, there was much more opportunities. There was a bit more money in the sport. Teams had more funding. There was a lot more sponsorship, and the opportunities really opened up if you had some talent. Where now, it's the first conversation is how much money you got, because the teams really need the money. They can't get the sponsors anymore. So the whole landscape has definitely changed, and you're not seeing that. I think the quality of drivers coming through as you did before, because the talent did come through because the opportunities were there.
Agreed. It used to be that the teams would look at the drivers and say, yeah, you look pretty handy, you look pretty handy. And with a few exceptions, that's not the case anymore. It is that sort of, okay, how much money? And the whole way through the ladder, it's getting diluted at a very early stage, because it's all about who's got the connections, who's got maybe the family wealth. So in a lot of cases, you're hiring the guy who's the best connected or the best at selling sponsorship, not the best driver. And there are definitely exceptions to that. Obviously, Stoffel Van Dorn just signed for McLaren, and he's clearly got there on absolute merit.
Did you feel a sense of extra pressure as a Brabham getting into Formula 1, following a 3-time world champion father?
I think the expectation was always going to be there with myself and my two brothers, because obviously as a father, as a 3-time world champion, and we're coming through, it takes time for people to respect you as who you are as a person, as a driver. So that takes time. And because for my path, I did British F3 thinking I was doing F3000. And of course, I did well in F3. I won the championship. I won Macau. And then I got a contract to do Formula 3000, which they were going to pay me for. And then they brought the Brabham Formula 1 team, shut the 3000 program down.
So Middlebridge, wasn't it?
Yeah, Middlebridge. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I'm a Formula 1 driver all of a sudden, which I'd probably say I wasn't quite ready to be a Formula 1 driver, but that I had no option. It was either F1 or go and find another drive somewhere.
And the timing wasn't good because that was the end of Brabham, wasn't it? It only lasted a year or so more, and it wasn't good.
Well, the part of the reason of going there was that the 89 season with Martin Brundle and Stefano Modena in the BT58 was a good little car. They had a couple of podiums, and I drove that car, and it was a super little car. But I always talk to Sergio Rinlin, who designed that and the BT59, the car that I drove, and he always says, "I'm so sorry, I built the worst car I'd ever designed, and you ended up in it."
And you've got him working for you again now?
Yeah. Now
why
I've forgiven him, so he's now working with us. But it was a difficult season because you could see the money was just not there. Halfway through the year, I go to the workshop, the tub's sitting there, but there's no engine, and the truck should have already left. No one had paid for the engine, so that's how bad it got, and it kept going for another year and a bit, and then it all folded.
Derek, when you started, what was the landscape of progression like? How many rungs were there on the ladder, and what were you thinking as you started out?
Well, I was thinking I'd like to race at Goodwood when I started, and thought, wouldn't it be great when I was on the farm just down the road, thinking one day I'd like to drive at Goodwood, little knowing it would go from that. But having said that, it's very obviously Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1, and I think it should be that today. I believe that you have to have a natural progression. Unfortunately, there are so many channels for people to drive. I guess Formula BMW, Formula Toyota, and Mazda, and all these ways, great to bring people into it. The problem is, at the end of the day, you don't know which was the best way for a young person to go. And I'm sure we all get asked, how do I start? You say, well, you've got to be in single-seaters. And I think all of us sitting here would say you have to come the single-seater route. However, it's difficult to say which car they would go and drive. And I have a young lad in America I follow a lot, try to help him. And I'm not going to mention any names, but the guy sort of started to go the right way, and I think, in my opinion, steered off a little bit. He should have stuck with single-seaters, but he is in America. So how does he get into IndyCar, or is he too tall for IndyCar? And I think he is too tall. But he's great young talent, so he's into sports cars. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think he needed more time learning single-seater racing, and I think that's what we all went through, was single-seater racing, wheel-to-wheel racing. There is nothing like it in the world, and there has to be something at the top. Formula 1 is the ultimate. Whether we agree it's the most exciting racing, I still think it's amazingly good. Still, the top drivers would be winning in any class of Formula 1. Whether it was in Stirling's day, Lewis would be out there doing really rather well. And it's the same throughout our history with your dad, whoever it was, would be at the top in whatever today. And I think it's very, very difficult for young people to know just sort of which way to work their way through. But Formula 1 is still the ultimate. And you only look at the crowds at Spa the other day, the crowds at Monza, and you see hundreds of thousands, it seems like it, of people filling the road afterwards. It doesn't happen in really any other races, and sadly, sports car racing has never had that following.
Yeah, but Michael Schumacher got to Formula 1 through sports cars, strangely enough.
Well, he came through karting, didn't he? Just a little.
Yeah.
Maybe 15 years of karting.
But if you can't get it through single-seaters, why not go through sports cars? Well, you go through a formula that you can shine at least you get...
Well, Mark
Webber
hill
did
that as well.
Like Sir Stirling,
excel in something and move to the next one.
Yeah, but Stirling came through... we were looking at the Keith Nortons out there yesterday. He'd spent a lot of time driving around in pretty horrible cars, going as quick as he could and winning races. So we came through single-seaters. I'm not saying not sports cars. I'm saying the cleanest way is to go the natural way. The only problem right now, in my opinion, is that there isn't any room at the top.
No.
Although you said they got the new sign up at McLaren.
I remember, Jochen, you came through touring cars, and I remember watching you at Le Mans lifting wheels.
I'm the shining example that it can be done different too. So.
Yeah, but I saw
It's,
you drive Formula 2. I seem to remember you beat me at the
hang on,
Nürburgring on the last lap.
That
was
just
single
proves the
seaters
point.
for me.
That just proves the point, Derek. It's,
But
I
were
started
good,
with
but
touring
you are
cars.
good, Jochen.
No,
Nobody ever
if-
says you're good, but you were really pretty good.
It's very difficult to write out a recipe how to approach your racing career and so on. So I think if you have the talent, it doesn't really matter much where you start. Single seaters, of course, it's one good thing, but now they're unaffordable. I mean, if you want to be in Formula 3, you have to come up with a budget of at least $1 million. And I think for somebody who is not exactly yet known, it's difficult to find the money unless you have rich relatives, companies who support you and things like that. But I think you can do it in various ways. I agree with that you have to learn a lot. If you live in the States and your victories, I think they are more valuable than a Grand Prix victory by a long shot in the United
US,
States.
yeah,
I mean, you could see it with Emerson as well. I mean, he was world champion before, but still his victories in Indy weighed a lot. So that's it's an interesting subject, in my opinion. It depends where you are in the world, but the States is very strong racing-wise and have their own life in racing.
I think it starts in the womb, you know. I think you can be Teflon coated in the womb and you become so slippery that you're born to do it. Look at, I mean,
I did wonder where this was going.
Max Verstappen, he was 12.8 seconds delivery, you know, I mean, that's quick. He was obviously always going to be a race car driver. How long did you take to arrive, Sterling? I bet you got here pretty quickly too, didn't you? So how early do young kids get into go-karts now? I mean, you get 4-year-olds, don't
But
you?
I think by the time they hit 16, 17, many of them are burned out
Yes.
because the pressures of the parents and this and that was too much.
But they never have a life.
The what?
They never have a life because they're spending the
They
whole
don't?
time driving and driving and driving and
And a
driving
lot,
and driving.
I think a lot of people now in most sports, not just racing, but their parents are attracted to their children doing a sport for the wrong reasons because they saw Michael Schumacher, Roger Federer, any of Andy
exactly,
Murray, these guys, and they think Tiger Woods. They think, there you go, Dave. There's a golf club. Batter away at that, and then the pressure starts. And it's not fun anymore. It's not a case of you sort of organically enjoy, you have a passion for it, and then it sort of happens. It's all people try to pre-plan it too much now, and it loses that fun.
Sterling, you said famously that you're grateful you raced in the era you did race in, because nowadays Lewis Hamilton has to go and chat to BlackBerry after a race, and you used to go and chase crumpet.
Exactly, that's what it was all about in those days. But times change, and now you've got. I mean, I never, thank God, had the problem of finding a sponsor. Because thank goodness John Heath, whoever is racing before, that would be his job, and he would prepare the car. And you go around Europe from race to race, getting to know the circuits and the people and everything else. And then you would, if you were any good, you'd be offered a better drive and so on. Yeah, I did have to buy my Maserati. My father went down to Mercedes and said, "What about trying my son out to see if he's any good?" They said, "Look, we've seen him driving crap and he's done a good job, but we'd like to see him in something a bit more competitive." And therefore, we had to go and buy a 250F, which is a wonderful car anyway.
Which is a bit like saying to a kid now, go and buy yourself a Red Bull.
Yeah.
And try and mix it with Mercedes or Ferrari or McLaren.
Yeah. But you see, then a couple of mechanics were all you needed. Now, my God, they have 100 and something at each race, and back at the factory as well. It's totally different.
But you put other drivers in your car at the time, didn't you? Sometimes just to make money, because keep going.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I would let Mike Hawthorne drive my car, for instance, because he'd get some money and help pay for the car.
Same as today, only the figures are obviously much reduced,
Yeah.
but if you can't find the dough, you don't get very far, do you?
Yeah.
Here's a thing, I'd like to hear all of your opinions. Are there a proliferation of junior categories because they are essentially money sponges? Someone starts a series for wealthy kids because they'll make a profit out of it.
Yeah, and everybody thinks they've got that answer, don't
We
they?
don't need as many as we've
No,
got.
God, do we? But Derek was saying that earlier. F3, F2, F1. That's the way it used to be. And now it's so complicated. I will say the one thing in the US that they've done very, very well is this Mazda Road to Indy. And it's a structured thing. And if you win at one level, you get funded for the next level. And all the way up to IndyCar. And it's a well thought out thing. Here now, where do you go? Is it BRDCF4, which they're now calling F3. Then we're the GP3 or Formula 3 or...
It means nothing to sponsors. Are you trying to get money off?
No.
Yeah,
to
it's
pay
a
for
series of letters and numbers, and I'm lost.
I think there's one word that you could say. There's too many agendas.
Yep. And
There's
it
just
dilutes
way too many agendas going on.
And it dilutes the talent pool. I mean, I'm sure you guys raced against the people that you raced in F1 earlier on, and you get to pick out, okay, who are the good people. Now you don't know who is the good, because they never race against each other.
Yeah.
I look now and I think, who?
But I also think, nobody's ever said how many young people are trying to get into racing and how many are trying to get into F3, and it must be 20 times or 100 times more than it was in our day. But in those days, I mean, as you came through, you really sort of had to follow that one particular route. And there was no way of going off to one side. Managers, owners, whatever, Formula One were watching the talent. The one place they could go. By the time we came to race day, there'd be 30 on the grid, and they were the 30 best in the world. 20 then. 22 maybe, but 20. Yeah. But whatever. But there were just this group of the best Formula 3 drivers in the world, and they were the best, because they'd all come from around the world to compete there. And I'm sure it was the same in your day, Stirling, in reality, as you went through. They just... they finalised at one big event, and the Formula One teams could watch and pick out their drivers for next year.
There were plenty of guys in your day who were in the wrong car at the wrong time. I mean, you were a bit of an exception because you made some terrible things go very quickly. Yeah. But a lot of guys fell by the wayside. They're in the wrong car.
But it depends what year you're talking about. I mean, times have changed very much in all the types of racing.
I mean, you follow modern racing, I know, because you used to ring the Autosport office and say, when's this on and how can I get hold of this? Are you confused by what you see with all the different championships and different formula?
But also the rules as well. I mean, all these things where they get penalised 4 seconds for something, I mean, that's a load of crap. And I think all that stuff should go. I mean, it's ridiculous. The guy gets in a race and he should go out there and beat the other guys and he's won. It isn't, it doesn't necessarily go that way now.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso got a 45-place grid penalty at Spa, which meant he could have started the Belgian Grand Prix at Zolder. I mean, how do you say to the man in the street, there's 22 cars on the grid, but this guy has got to start 45th?
Well, you can't.
They're going to walk away, aren't they?
Yeah, of course they are. I think we're making it far too complicated.
For us, we love the older tracks, like here, like this place here, because it's got character. There's a fear factor about this place. The current tracks, there's no more fear factor. So the thing that draws people to watch racing was the fear factor, and still is, but that's diminishing. So then it becomes, like you said, entertainment. So then how do you get entertainment in Formula One when one team's got 600 million budget and the other one's got 60 million? You know what I mean? And the gaps are so big. So then they start messing around with the rules to try and get entertainment. But we're not stupid. People watching the races aren't stupid. They can see they're messing with stuff, trying to get the entertainment. But the core root causes of the problem aren't being dealt with. So you're always going to have this problem.
I think one of the problems, one of the problems is that the promoters in Europe for the Grand Prix, worldwide actually, and they can only recoup their money on the gate. So that's wrong already in itself. The American promoters, they are encouraged to, because nothing comes easy. Also in the States, they have to do a lot of work for the NASCAR races before and all that. So to get a full house, to have a lot of spectators. And then they can pay high prize monies and all that. So if they have a bad show and a few people turn up, there wouldn't be much more prize money anymore, and so on. So that makes sense, and that we don't allow the Formula One promoters at all.
I think
they're all like this.
I think we're mixing up two things here.
Yeah.
Talk about the business side. To me, it's the show. What have we all said? Entertainment.
Yeah, but one leads to the other.
I know it does. But no, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying. I saw some pictures the other day in one of the magazines, probably leading up to this. Pictures of Jimmy sideways, Jochen Rindt broadside coming round the various racetracks. And Stirling, of course. I mean, all of us actually had our spell of that. A few weeks ago, I was at an event with Emerson Fittipaldi with McLaren, and they were showing the race of that year. And suddenly you heard the presenters of last year, McLaren race, and they said, "Oh, look at that. Lewis Hamilton got a bit sideways then." And Emerson looked at me in front of 150 people and said, "We were sideways on every effing corner." Weren't we? And that's the point. You gotta get those bloody cars to move. You can't do it. Making wider tires, I can't see is going to solve it.
That's why people come here to watch. I mean, you boring down the straight past the pitch yesterday.
Well,
I mean, it was absolutely jam-packed with people watching the race. It will be today, it will be tomorrow.
Well, it's raining, so it's about to get really sideways, because I'm just noticing, in fact, it's raining. But it's still a beautiful sport, isn't it? And we still love it, and we complain endlessly, and I certainly do. But it's still a cracking sport, and you still watch somebody at the top of their game driving a great car, and you just think, yeah, you watch Lewis on a qualifying lap, and that thing, when all the power kicks in, and it does have a bit of a moment, and you think, yeah, it's still cool.
But there's not enough moments. You
No,
have to
there's
be
not.
watching that moment, don't you?
Trouble is, we don't see enough of it.
No, we don't.
You need a very good television camera to show you what's happening, and that's the trouble. As a spectator outside, you see nothing.
If you watch, at first the cars were sort of down here, and you could really see these men at work, what they were doing, and bit by bit the cars have got higher and higher and higher. And then when Senna died, it was the final thing with these cockpit sides, which it saved my life twice. And I know for a fact with these cockpit sides. But where does it stop?
If you start putting all this cockpit stuff, it becomes a sports car in some way. So for me, I haven't had the issues that Dario's had by losing people from those types of injuries. But for me, I just think we can take this too far, and then we just lose what racing's about.
But I think a halo wouldn't necessarily have saved your friend and teammate Roland Ratzenberger.
No,
Formula in '94.
No, it wouldn't have done. No, you're never ever going to get rid of the chance of someone dying in a car. But we go racing because we love racing, but we're all aware of the risks as well. If we don't think it's safe, don't do it. But we all still get in the car. Yeah. And I think that's what drives us as people. We want to push the risks. We want to push that little bit more. What's out there? What's the boundaries?
But we need some better circuits as well. I mean, this crap that Tilke brings out, they're awful. I mean,
speak
they've
your
got no
mind.
character, you know what I mean? And that's
you guys, you had a sort of a gentleman's agreement, really, among you. You didn't bang wheels with them. There weren't...
Because you died if you did.
Yeah, there weren't endless gravel traps and nice squidgy tyres. Yeah. There were sheer drops and trees. It's what you're exposed to, isn't it? And it's what you understand.
Yes, but motor racing is dangerous, and everybody in here knows that. Nobody goes into the sport sort of thinking it's a safe ride. It isn't. If you make mistakes and the car breaks, and so on, I mean, that's pretty serious.
It leads to reckless driving too, and rather, you lose the respect. Yes. You lose the respect towards what you're doing, also towards your competitors on the road. And I tell you what, Tilke. Sorry. Talking about Tilke, we rubbish him in a way, but he's given a certain terrain, and within that stipulated certain straights of a certain length, a certain amount of corners, and all things like that. So he's stuck, and he's doing not a bad job under the light of things. It's not his ideas to do it like that. He could make much nicer circuits, like the one in Shanghai, which is much better. But the Chinese accepted that readily, and they said, perfect, let's do that, and so on. But, we have... I lost track now.
How many people went to Shanghai then?
Everybody again.
No, how many watched?
32.
I
think it was 32.
Literally
32 people.
Yeah. 32 people. Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Full of people.
Well, he did say. Well, no, they make them up. They make pictures on the back of the seats. But I mean, let's face it. We knew. I mean, you look around here. Okay, you were lucky. We're lucky, and you're so lucky we're here. But the fact is, none of us are nutcases. We're all pretty normal people. We just love racing cars. And we'll race it whatever it is. We go out there and race here, and you go, what the hell are you doing driving around Goodwood in that? We knew the dangers. But in our era, certainly, our era, and Jochen's, 30% of the drivers died in motor racing, in Formula One particularly. Bless his heart, the last major accident in F1 was Ayrton Senna, really, until the sad tragedy of last year. But that was not totally, it was one of those incidents. But I think racing's so much safer, but you keep making it safe, they're going to keep taking chances. And look what's been happening this year. They just push each other off the road. Yeah. They wouldn't do that nowadays with a bloody tree behind it.
Having watched the sprint cars, World of Outlaw cars, all that stuff, I'd have been scared. 850 horsepower on a track as small as an eighth of a mile, no weight limit, so they're as light as they want to be, and they're terrifying. The unfortunate thing is now what you learn in that type of racing doesn't translate to driving a rear-engined, heavy downforce Indy car, and that's why we've seen a lot of the guys in that sort of type of racing heading to NASCAR, because that constant sliding is what is needed for that type of racing.
Well, dirt track ovals would be very useful for driving at Goodwood, of course.
Yeah.
When you look at the way people drive here, I mean, the nicely cropped grass here ends up pretty chewed up, doesn't it, by the end of this meeting?
It gets quite slippery too. I found that out about 10 years ago.
Yeah, nobody told us the
thing
grey
is,
bit between the green stuff, which is the road.
well, the sad thing here is that you get lovely cars like 250Fs buggered up with rollover bars all over them and things. I mean, it's kind of sad when modern safety takes over old cars and they start ruining the look of the thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry I spoiled it just because I rolled in front of the pits here.
I think you've stumbled on next year's theme, I think. Aesthetics. We could talk about that a lot, couldn't we?
We could indeed. Yeah, that would be a good theme as well.
This is the point we get to. It's my least favourite bit of the whole weekend, where I have to tell you to shut up. It's been magnificent, as usual. Thank you, gentlemen. Please don't start clapping till I've said all their names, because I'll be drowned out. Sir Stirling Moss, Alain de Cadenet, Dario Franchitti, Jochen Mass, Derek Bell and David Brabham. Thank you, guys.